Joe Rogan won the favor of Donald Trump by doing Trump a big election favor, but his podcast just took a step backwards, and I have the breaking David and Goliath story for you next, a story with a connection to Taylor Swift. Love was in the air during this post-election moment between Trump and Rogan because of their mutually beneficial transaction. And Eric Trump was surely saying to himself, "Why doesn't Daddy ever look at me like that?" But I digress. The transaction I'm speaking of was Trump's appearance on Joe Rogan's podcast. It was significant for Rogan because pre-election, Trump was the interview big whale that everyone was after. And it was significant for Trump because at the time, Rogan's podcast was #1 and his audience base is mostly younger white males, the demographic that Trump correctly bet would carry him across the finish line. Please have a look at this piece for context, and then I will show you who the unexpected David is to Rogan's podcast Goliath, the new #1, and the intimate connection this person has to the Donald Trump denouncing Taylor Swift.
Donald Trump's victory speech, as family, friends, and campaign staff took to the stage and celebrated, we heard some unusual thank yous you don't normally hear from any political campaign.
I want to thank some people real quick. I want to thank the Nelp boys, Aiden Ross, Theo Vaughn, Bussin' with the Boys, and last but not least, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
White was shouting out just some of the massive podcasters and live streamers who embraced and platformed Donald Trump during his campaign.
The most anticipated and significant podcast of all time that has already been breaking records on the internet for likes, views, and engagement since the moment it was uploaded.
You like to weave things in?
Yeah, but when you do the weaves, and you have to be very smart to do weaves, when you do the weave, look at this, just in this one thing, we're talking about little pieces all over here, but it always ends up
home. Yeah.
For the right people. For the wrong people, it doesn't come back home and they end up in the wilderness, right?
It's like he's real good at you ask him a question and he starts to answer it, but then he takes you on a totally different route. Bring him back in, but you got to be respectful. So it's like, I knew that that's the way he does it, but I'm like, I understand what you're doing, sir, but let's get it back to what I was asking you.
I interviewed jet pilots that say they saw something, and they said, we saw things, sir, that were very strange. And if I'm a little off tonight, I'm going to blame you. I'm going to say I spoke to this guy for 3 hours.
Funny. It's stand-up. It's funny stuff. But it's like you were making fun of Elon one time. You were doing an Elon impression. It's great. You have like comedic instincts.
You need at least the attitude of a comedian when you're doing this business. This is a very dangerous business.
So that was Joe Rogan's bromance with Donald Trump on full display. But that was 6 weeks ago, and Rogan just got knocked off by a new podcast hosted by a relative unknown, and it is someone with a very different kind of message. This is a curiosity that may be signaling a post-election shift. The article that caught my eye read, Kylie Kelce's podcast tops Spotify and Apple charts. Curious how Kylie Kelce's podcast skyrocketed to the top of the charts on Apple and Spotify? With a debut episode that ousted Joe Rogan's The Joe Rogan Experience from its long-standing #1 spot, not gonna lie, quickly became a podcasting sensation, sparking conversations about its rapid rise and cultural impact. I described her as relatively unknown, but maybe that's just generational and I don't know what I don't know. But I do know the company she keeps is very well known. Have a look for yourself, and on the other side, I'll speak to the cultural impact.
Kylie Kelce.
She is, of course, the wife of now retired Philadelphia Eagles star Jason Kelce.
We started by saying you are not a spotlight person.
Yes.
The spotlight has grown slightly harder because Uncle Trav, is dating a certain someone.
Yes.
Don't want to put you too much on the spot about it, but what's it been like to kind of watch that close up?
Ultimately, if Trav is happy, we're happy. We are always cheering on Uncle Trav. It's such a treat to be able to do that on and off the field. Mm-hmm. But it's been amazing.
Well, they're a very cute couple. But what's it like to kind of have these bright lights on you?
It's interesting. I am trying to take it in stride and just make sure that as people are talking about me, that it's about important things. So the Eagles Autism Foundation is the perfect example. I had a neighbor growing up, Tim, who was like my brother. And so it gave me this deep love and appreciation for one person who was on the autism spectrum. And so therefore it sort of just gives you this love. And it definitely fueled my passion.
We've got a podcast in the works. It's called Not Gonna Lie with Kylie Kelsey.
Listen, I'm just as shocked as all of you that I'm starting a podcast, but if everyone's going to be talking about me and my family, you might as well hear it from me. On Not Gonna Lie, you're going to hear my brutally honest opinions on motherhood, the biggest stories in sports and entertainment, social media trends, and I'm excited to be doing it with the help of some incredible guests that I have no business talking to.
In the grand scheme of things, based on what we just saw, I think it is unlikely that we're going to hear a lot of political talk on Kylie Kelsey's podcast. But her brother-in-law's girlfriend, Taylor Swift, who at times seemed reluctant herself, rose to the occasion when Donald Trump was so egregious with hate and venom towards women and minorities. She showed by example that even the reluctant will step forward to speak up and speak out for those without a platform. And even if she doesn't become the anti-Joe Rogan, the earnest wholesomeness that she already projects is a nice counterbalance to the aggressive bro culture that is found on the podcast that rallied behind Trump and supported his negativity, misogyny, and racism, either directly or simply by looking the other way.